everyone, it's Natasha. I am doing my first live video, and the reason I'm putting this video together, as you can probably tell from the title, is I'm helping people who want to plan a trip to Europe. I just got back from Europe. I was in Europe with my beautiful new baby, Leo. We were there for 4 weeks, and I get questions from people quite often about how to put together a trip. Where do you start? What do you do? This was actually my 10th time in Europe. Visited about 20 different destinations in Europe, all across from Iceland to Russia. And so I wanted to put together a video to help you know what you need to do in order to plan from where to go, how long, what time of year to go, safety, all those different kinds of things. So putting together this video, I wrote down notes because, like I just said, I had a kid, and so now I have mom brain and I forget things all the time. So if you see me looking down, I'm looking at my notes so I don't forget what I came here to talk about. So yeah, if you're interested in going to Europe, 2020 is just around the corner. So if you're wanting to go to Europe next year, it's a great time to start planning that. And if it's your first time, or if you have been before, but you're just planning to go to a new region or a new country, I'll cover some tips for how to get the most out of your trip, and especially get the most out of your budget. So the first question is, how long should you go? I know most people kind of start with where to go, but I think actually the better question is first to figure out how long you want to travel for. So before you pick the countries, decide how long you think you're going to be going for. I would say if you're coming from the United States, that you would at a minimum want to give yourself at least about a week, 6 to 7 days of travel in Europe, because you have to account for travel time, getting there and getting back, as well as the jet lag that can happen from the time change. So I would say at a minimum you want to give yourself 6 to 7 days, but from there you can really, the sky is the limit. I've gone for 10 days. I've gone for, like I said, I just came back from 4 weeks. I've done 3 weeks in Europe. So really you can stay as long as you want. There's endless things to do, endless places to visit. So I would say just at a minimum, think about that as 6 to 7 days to start with. And then the next thing you want to think about is where to go. And so, as I said, you want to think about how long you're going to stay when you're thinking about where to go, and also think about your budget. So starting with how long you're going to be there, if you're going to be staying for a week or less, I would say stick to one country, or stick to, I would say, one main city, and then you can do day trips from there to other places. For instance, if you were going to stay in Paris and you wanted to do a whole week there, you could also do day trip out to Versailles. Or if you were staying in Rome, you could stay there for the majority of your trip, but do a day trip to Pompeii. So you can actually see more than one place while you're there, but the majority of your trip will be based in that one city, and you'll be able to avoid the headache of moving from city to city, which is really difficult when you don't have a lot of time. And so I would say if you're going to be there for a short period of time, like a week or less, stick to one country, one main city. If there's two places that are really close to each other, like right across the border, for instance, I was in Munich and we did a trip over to Vienna in Austria, then it's possible to kind of squeeze in two different places. But for the most part, if it's a week or less, I would say stick to one country. Now, if you have 2 weeks or more, I think you could expand that a little bit further. You could do now at this point maybe 2 or 3 different places that you want to visit, and start to go to more places in one region of Europe. So stick to maybe Western Europe, Central Europe, Eastern Europe, the Mediterranean. Like, stick to one area so that you are not spending a bunch of time on a plane if you need to travel from one city to the other. Because again, the time is really precious. You don't want to spend your entire day in an airport, then sitting on a plane, and then sitting on a train, and then sitting in a car. And so all of those different things start to add up, and then you don't actually have that much time where you get to experience the place that you're at. You're spending all of your time getting there. So that's really the key thing that I've learned from trying to fit too much in. So this is really coming from my own experience, because when I first started traveling, I wanted to do everything. I wanted to have a jam-packed schedule. I wanted to go everywhere. And the problem was, one, I would end up exhausted every single day, and then the next day try to get up and do it all over again. And then the other thing was, I just didn't really get an opportunity to soak things in. I didn't get a chance to sit and talk with people or just relax and take in the surroundings of the place that I was visiting and have those kind of serendipitous moments where you say, hey, this sounds really interesting. I'm going to go do that. Or, tomorrow I don't have a plan. I'm just going to wander around and see what I come across that's really interesting. And so if you do less with your time, you'll actually have a greater experience. And so that's where these recommendations of doing fewer destinations, even though it's very possible in 2 weeks to go to 5-6 different places, it's not recommended in my opinion, because it takes you to a point of exhaustion and you don't really get a chance to soak up as much as possible. And the lesson that I also learned from that is that you can always go back. Like I said, I've been back 10 times at this point. So I've gone to places like Rome. I've been there 4 times. And so the first time I wanted to see everything and do everything, and I didn't, because nobody ever can. But over time, I was able to return and I see more things and do something different, and then can go at a more relaxed pace because I realized I can always come back to that place and have an experience that I didn't get to have the first, second, or third time. So that's 1 week or 2 week. If you have 3 weeks, anything more than 3 weeks, really at that point, I think you could start to explore a little bit further in terms of going to more stops and explore an entire region. So you could go to Scandinavia and make a stop in Norway and then go to Sweden and then Denmark or Finland somewhere. You could go to the Baltics and hop around, or you could hop along the Mediterranean to a few different places. So if you go from 3 weeks to 4 weeks, really anything past that, you'll really be able to do a lot with your time. I know most of us don't have the luxury of going for that long, but if you do, then you really, you can do a lot in terms of crisscrossing and having a schedule where you don't have to stick to one area. You could go, I did from Spain and then I went to Turkey. And so I just, on a whim, those were 2 places that interested me. So I did those both in one trip, and it's easier when you have a little bit more time because then you can budget in time for travel between your destinations. So that's for where to go. The other piece is budget. So bigger cities obviously cost more money to be in. So if you're visiting Paris or a London, then you're going to probably have the expenses are going to be more expensive. So the places that you stay in, accommodations, the restaurants will be more expensive. Other things to consider that you might not know, Eastern Europe tends to be cheaper than Western Europe. So if you go past Germany, so if you're into Austria and Poland, Hungary, even if you go as far as like Romania, Albania, I know those are places that tend to be on most people's lists, but if you go further east, the expenses tend to get cheaper there. Also, fall, winter, and spring tend to be cheaper than summer. Summer is the high season all across Europe. Everyone wants to go in the summertime. So if you are able to go in other times of the year, you'll be able to get a much better deal on a lot of things, especially accommodations. And then the other thing to consider is that the northern half of Europe is a lot more expensive than the southern half. So northern half, think Norway, think Sweden, Denmark, Switzerland. I just came back from Switzerland. My God, that place is so expensive. If you're on a budget, please just leave Switzerland off of your list for right now, because I did not realize how expensive it was. It's an amazing and beautiful place, but yes, very expensive. If you're on a budget, it is not budget friendly. Same thing goes for Iceland, also not budget friendly. But if you are looking for a place that's more budget friendly, looking for places that are in the southern half of Europe, so if like a Portugal, Spain, Greece, Italy, they tend to be more budget friendly. Croatia was really, really budget friendly. So think about where you're going to go with your budget, because your money can go further if you choose certain destinations versus just thinking of the big marquee locations like Paris and Rome and London. You might want to consider as places that are a little bit I wouldn't say off the beaten path. Like I'd say going to Lisbon, Portugal, it's still a really popular place and it has incredible history, but it might not be the first place on the list for your first trip to Europe, but I definitely think it's worth considering. So Oh, also, then think of what you want to do. So, if your trip you want good food, Italy is an amazing place to go. France is great. Turkey is also has amazing food. Do you want a beach? Do you want shopping, history, and museums? You can find everything in Europe. So really, it just is a matter of what is at the top of your list of the experience that you want. Beautiful outdoors. Switzerland's gorgeous. Norway's also beautiful for the outdoors, as is Iceland. But again, think of your budget. Nightlife, Germany, if you want to go to Berlin, the nightlife there is incredible. Do you want some place that's really quiet? Maybe you want to go to a place like in Eastern Europe, or if you want to go to a smaller town that's not one of the bigger cities, you might have a quieter experience, or really want that cultural immersion. So you could go to a place where you're not going to find a bunch of people who speak English and it's not full of tourists. And that was the experience I had the first time I went to Turkey. It's completely different from Western Europe and Western culture. You have a Islamic culture, and it's very different completely from everything that I would have experienced if I just stuck to the Western side of Europe. So something to consider is one, what kind of experience that you want to have. Two, what is the budget that you want to spend, and then how long are you going to be there when you're deciding where do you want to go in Europe, because there's something like 50 something different countries, I think, in Europe, so you have a lot of choices. And you might want to just knock off those bucket list places first for your first trip. That's what I did. The first time I went to London and Paris and Barcelona and Rome and Athens. Those were the big cities that I wanted to see. We stopped in a couple of smaller cities. I did an organized tour the very first time I went. And then after that, the subsequent times I've been to Europe, then I started going to smaller places and seeing things that I after I had knocked off the bucket list of wanting to see those big cities. Next thing, when to go. So the best time of year to go, in my opinion, is the shoulder season, which is spring and the fall. Spring, usually like late April into May, you'll get great weather, and the crowds haven't gotten to the summer size of being extremely large. And then in the fall, I just came back. Spending October in Europe was great. There was beautiful weather. The crowds were very minimal. All of the attractions were still open. So October and September as well are a great time to go in the fall. If you go in the summer, everything will be open, but prices will be higher. The crowds will be a lot bigger, and things might sell out. Sometimes some attractions, they only let a certain number of people come in each day. For instance, I went to see the Last Supper in Italy, and they only sell a certain number of tickets per day to see the Last Supper. So in the summertime, they sell out weeks and weeks in advance. So you really have to plan far ahead if you want to go in the high season, because a lot of attractions like that will sell out. On the flip side, if you go in the winter, a lot of attractions will be closed unless they're specifically a winter attraction. So if you want to go skiing, obviously the slopes will be open, but if you're in the middle of the city, some of those attractions might be closed because they're not getting the volume of tourists that they need in order to stay open. And let's see, what else do we have? Oh, yeah, like I said, so the winter stuff will be different. Skiing, if you're going to see the Northern Lights, so if you go to a cold place like Iceland, or if you go to the North Pole, they actually have a place called the North Pole in Finland where they do like a Christmas attraction in the winter, and you can visit Santa's workshop and meet Mrs. Claus and all that stuff. So those kinds of things are open in the winter. If you want to go and you remember to bundle up and you don't mind the cold, then you can find some really cool attractions there. The Christmas markets all across Europe are really cool to do in the winter. So winter is not, you don't have to completely cancel the idea of doing Europe in the winter. You just might do a bit of a different experience than what you would traditionally do on your list of activities if you were to plan a trip in the summer. So the next thing, how to get around if you're in Europe. The really nice thing about Europe as opposed to the US is that flying from place to place is really easy and really inexpensive. They have tons of budget, low-cost airlines where you can fly from one country to another or a city to another for as low as I've seen flights for like £5 or like $10. It's really, really, really cheap, really, really inexpensive. And safe as well. You can fly on these planes. They're not like little rinky-dink planes. Some of them probably are a little rinky-dink, but most of them are really, really safe. And you don't have to worry about, all of the issues with like the airlines in terms of having to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars in order to go from one side of the country to the other. In the US, you can spend like $600 to fly from Seattle to New York, but over there you could fly across the entire continent and you could spend $100 maybe. So that's one of the really nice things about flying in Europe. But if you do fly some of those low-cost airlines, make sure that you read the fine print, because a lot of times they restrict what is included with your ticket. For instance, they might not include a checked bag, which most of us are used to nowadays, not having your checked bag included, and you have to pay an extra amount for that. But they might charge you one amount if you buy your checked bag when you book your ticket online, and then they'll charge you even more if you try to check your bag when you get to the airport. So it might be $40 if you do it in advance, but $80 if you do it once you get to the airport. So make sure you read the fine print, because there's a lot of little things that are included and not included, and you don't want to end up paying a bunch of fees, and that eliminates the entire reason why you were buying a low-cost plane ticket. So the other thing is trains. Trains are really, really big in Europe, and I think a great way to get around, if possible, I would say taking at least one scenic train ride while you're there is a must-do thing to do in Europe, because we don't have a cool train system in the States. We have trains, but they're not nearly as expansive as they are in Europe. And it's really easy to take the trains from city to city. If you're going both within the country as well as you're going between countries, there is a huge train network that can get you pretty much anywhere you're going in Europe. I would say with the train system, the trains can get pricey, so booking those in advance is advisable. The same way that you would book a plane ticket in advance. If you're going between countries, you'll want to book those trains in advance. Some of the trains, like if you're doing a subway, those are fine. Book those as you need them. And some of the daily trains that run all the time, the prices don't go up. But if you're going to be buying a ticket to go between two countries, look at those and shop around as well, because not all of the trains charge the same amount. Some trains, it's a high-speed train, and so they'll charge you more for that. And some trains are a more luxury brand, so they cost more. So just make sure that you shop around and look at what you're getting for the amount that you're paying for the train ticket. Other ways to get around, there's buses, which are really easy. If you're going a short distance, a bus is a really quick and easy way to get from place to place. I wouldn't recommend it for a long-term travel, because again, most of us don't have a bunch of time to be sitting on a bus, and with the option of being able to take a plane for a really cheap amount, then why would you waste all day sitting on a bus when you could get on a plane and get to your destination in an hour or two? So buses for short distances, I think, are a good option. You can also rent a car. And I've rented a car in a few countries in Europe. It's really easy, pretty much the same process that you have here in the States. You just need to make sure you bring both your driver's license and your passport when you rent the car. I've forgotten my driver's license a couple times. And I don't know why I thought I didn't need my driver's license. I thought I just need my passport, and then I got there and I couldn't get the car, and it was a big headache, and I had to cancel my reservation and get a new reservation, and it cost more money. And so please just learn from my mistake and make sure you bring your driver's license with you if you're going to rent a car wherever you go in the world. They drive on the right side of the road in most of Europe, except for the UK and Ireland. So you don't have to worry about not understanding the rules of the road. They're pretty much the same for the most part. Their signs are a little bit different, and everything's in kilometers and not miles. So that's something else to know. If you see a sign on the side of the road that says 80, it's not 80 miles per hour, it's 80 kilometers per hour. But it's really relatively easy to adapt to. Even driving on the opposite side of the road, I drove in Ireland and in Scotland earlier this year on the left side of the road, and it takes some getting used to, but it's not too bad. So I think driving, it gives you a lot of freedom, and you'll be able to see a lot more. You don't have to wait on tours and things like that if you want to get out of the city and be able to take a day trip. So renting a car is another really good option. And let's see, next thing, money. With getting access to your money in Europe, chip credit cards are accepted pretty much everywhere. So that's my number one go-to, is just to take a chip credit card with you, and you can charge most of your expenses with that credit card. Make sure if you do take a credit card, that it is a card that doesn't charge foreign transaction fees. And you can always call your bank and double check to make sure they don't charge foreign transaction fees, but usually it's like a percentage of every single purchase that you make would get charged an additional fee. And you don't want that because it will add up very quickly. The first time I went to Europe, I had a card that charged foreign transaction fees, and it took a big chunk out of my budget. So make sure that you know what your credit card company or debit card company will charge you for each of those purchases. The first card that I got that didn't was a Capital One like Quicksilver card, and it was my first credit card ever. I think my credit limit was like $500 or something really, really low. And, but it worked. I would just swipe it and then hurry up and pay it off. And I charge up to $500 again. So that made life really easy. If you have a debit card, you can take that with you and withdraw money from ATMs. The best ATMs for you to use are any ATM that's actually at a bank. So ATMs on the street can be really sketchy. There's different scams that are run where people put readers on the ATM, and they'll be able to steal your card information and your PIN number. So make sure that you use an ATM that's actually within the bank, because it's much safer for accessing your money. The next thing is language. If you're sticking to touristy cities, the big cities, English will get you by just fine. Obviously, if you're in the UK, English will get you by because that's where English is from. Other than that, though, if you're in a big city, it's very easy to find people who will be able to speak English, and you don't necessarily need to be able to speak the language. There's so many languages in Europe, so there's nobody that would be able to get by across all of Europe speaking the native language pretty much. So it's very easy to find English speakers. Most people in Europe, they speak a second language, and the second language that they speak more often than not is going to be English. Some of them are better English speakers than I am. Like if you're in Germany, their English is superb, and yeah, they speak better English than I do. So you don't have to worry about trying to learn every language, but it still is good practice for you to try to learn a few words in the local language. Hello, goodbye, excuse me, thank you, how much is this, are good ones to learn. And there's tons of apps that you can use, and I can talk about those in later videos about ways to get by the language barriers, because I've been through that experience many times of trying to figure out how to order off of a menu. Like, you're pointing at stuff and saying, is this moo, or is this buck buck, or oink oink? And yeah, so there's tons of ways you can get by if you don't actually speak the same language as the person that's helping you. But for the most part in Europe, you should be good with just English. The next thing is safety. In Europe, it's relatively safe. I would say just use the same caution that you would in any big city anywhere else in the world. You don't have to do anything particularly different. Don't walk around by yourself in the middle of the night. Don't go to areas of town where people say are dangerous. But the one thing that I would say about Europe that is a little bit different than the US is pickpockets. And you'll hear pretty much everywhere you are on trains and malls and everything, you'll see signs that will say, watch out for pickpockets. Pickpocketing is a lot bigger of an issue in Europe than it is in the US. So make sure to protect your valuables. Don't wear a backpack with all of your valuables in it where you can't see or access the backpack and have somebody be able to reach in and steal stuff from you. So they have backpacks where the zipper pocket is actually up against your back, so nobody would be able to access it if you were wearing it on your back. Those are a good option. They also have those travel belts where you can put all your stuff in underneath your clothes. I've never used one of those, but another option. I just use my purse, but I'm very, very vigilant and conscious of my purse and where it is, and not leaving it in a place where it would be vulnerable. If you go into a restaurant, don't just leave your stuff on a chair and then walk away to go get your food or something. Make sure that you keep your stuff with you at all times. Don't leave your phone just sitting out. Those are things, when I travel with Isaac, I always have to remind him, because he will just leave things everywhere and like, oh, I'm in the cafe, and just toss his phone and his stuff down and walk to the bathroom. I'm like, you can't do that over here. You're like, your stuff is going to disappear. It's going to get picked up and gone. So one thing to remember is that you need to keep an eye on your things because pickpockets are an issue in Europe. The other thing, the last thing actually, is family and solo travel. And I won't go into this super in depth. I'll be talking about this more, I think, in future videos to talk more specifically about traveling with your family or traveling alone. But overall, Europe is a really great place for family travel and for traveling solo. I traveled last month with my son and some other family members, and it was really, really easy. I breastfeeding him, and so no issues with people being, just horrified by me breastfeeding my son in a public place. Like no issues there. It's easy, like in terms of everything being paved, so getting strollers around, being able to go to different attractions, and then being kid friendly. You don't have to pay extra if you have a small child, like an infant for most places. If you go to the airports, pretty much every single airport had a family travel lane, so we would be expedited through the airport from check-in all the way to getting on the plane. What else? There's a lot of attractions for kids who are a little bit older. There's like Disneyland Paris, and there's tons of parks and things like that if you're traveling with a family. So Europe is very family friendly. And then on the other half, talking about solo travel, like I said, it's very safe and easy to get around, and it's easy to meet other travelers because there's tons of people traveling to Europe all the time. So if you want to meet other travelers, if you stay in hostels or if you stay in Airbnbs and want to be able to meet people who will host you and spend time with you to show you the city and make friends, it's really, really easy to connect with people while you're there. So if you're traveling solo, you don't have to be alone if you don't want to be. Let's see. Yeah, so that's pretty much all of the things I have to share on traveling to Europe. Like I said, if you're planning on a trip to Europe in 2020, I think it's an awesome destination. You really can't go wrong because you have so much variety all across Europe. So thank you so much for joining me. If you have questions, please let me know. I have answers, hopefully. So you can leave a comment with any questions that you have about Europe, about travel in general. If you have questions that are specific to traveling with a family or traveling solo, please also leave those. Like I said, I'll be doing more content specifically around traveling with a family or traveling solo. So I would love any questions to help me figure out what is the things that I should focus on specifically to help be of most help. And yeah, let me know if you would like to stay in touch via email as well, so I can answer all of your questions. And thank you again for joining me. Bye, guys.